Welcome back to Galley of the Sun. Yesterday, Greg made a brisket. And when we make brisket around here at Galley of the Sun, we don't make a little brisket. We make a full whole brisket, which means leftovers. So, what do you do with all that leftover brisket? Well, besides eat it, because it's good just by itself. One of our favorite things to do is to make brisket stroganoff. So I've got everything out here to make it. All of the ingredients and all the directions will be down in the common area. So I've got 4 cups of beef broth, about a cup of Cabernet Sauvignon, about a cup and a half of flour. If you don't have Cavender's, I think that's how I pronounce it, great all-purpose Greek seasoning, excellent seasoning to have. You can use Italian seasoning instead. Olive oil, I've got about 1 medium to large sweet onion chopped up diced. Got about 1.75 pounds of smoked brisket. I cut this up yesterday and you'll see it's about 1/4 inch to about 2 by 1, about the size that you want. I've got 16 ounces of sliced mushrooms. I've got about 1/4 cup of garlic because, you know, garlic, we love garlic. It's more or less to your liking. I have 2 teaspoons thyme. I've got about 2 teaspoons of tarragon and about 2 teaspoons of parsley. I also have a can of condensed cream of mushroom soup. And you can't do stroganoff without some sour cream. And then we've got egg noodles to put it all on top of. So to begin this off with, we're just going to start prepping the brisket. And I just kind of broke it up a little bit so that it's not all stuck together from being in the fridge yesterday. And we're going to toss in our flour. And I don't have an exact measure for this, but I use maybe a tablespoon or 2. I get a good seasoning amount in there. And then you just close up your Ziploc bag, and this is the easiest way to do it. And you give it a couple of, and hopefully get it closed. Give it a couple of good shakes, a couple of good turns. You want to get each piece of brisket coated. And it's okay if you have extra left in the bag because we're going to use it later. But you want to kind of mix it up, get it all in there. And we have found that out of all of the different stroganoff recipes out there, this is probably the best one we've done. So now that I've done this, I'm going to go and we're going to move everything over to that side in front of the stove where I have a pot of water getting ready for the egg noodles. I have a pan that I'm going to put the beef on as soon as I get it browned, and another high-sided pan to do the cooking of the entire stroganoff in. The reason why I use a high-sided pan is because you're going to brown these in oil and it's going to splatter. You don't want to splatter everywhere. Plus, you want enough room for everything once it's in there. 1 pan. Now, you can use a Dutch oven or, you know, if you've got a really nice big skillet with some high sides on it, you can do that too. All right, so let's get everything moved over. So now that we're over at the stove, we're getting everything ready. And I put maybe about 2-3 tablespoons of olive oil down in the pan over about medium heat. I let that get hot. And we're going to open up our bag of brisket pieces. And you'll notice that they now look like this. They're all covered, which is exactly what we want. In this recipe, you're probably going to use 1/4 cup to a full cup of olive oil, but you'll be using it in small amounts, adding it, coating the bottom of the pan, and it's mostly so we can fry this. So you just want to lay these in here, and you want to leave enough room so that they have a chance to brown up and crisp up. And you just shake it, give it a little shake before it goes in. And you always want to leave a little bit of room between each one of these so that they can cook properly. Now, even though your brisket's already cooked, we are still coating them and flouring them so that they can fry up and crisp up. and it just makes an incredible texture to the meat when you do the stroganoff. So I'm just going to give it a real quick check, see how we're doing on this side. You can see it's starting to brown up some. We want a little more crispy and brown than that, so we're just going to let that go for a little bit. All right, so I'm turning these over now because you can start to see that some of them are crisping up really nicely. Adjust the pot over the heat a little bit. And as you can see, that they do pop a little bit, hence the high-sided pot that I'm using. Keeps your stove a little cleaner, keeps you a little cleaner. But as you can see, they start getting nice and crispy. And that's kind of what we're after, is getting them kind of that nice crispiness. And you can see some of the fat from it will render down too, which is just fine because we all know that fat means flavor. So you can start seeing how these kind of look when they come out. You can see kind of the crispiness that's happening. You see a little bit of flour. It stays in the pan with the oil, which is fine. That's exactly what we're looking for. And we're going with the second batch into the oil. So around here at the Galley of the Sun, we don't make bad brisket, but there's been, you know, some trial and error. And if you end up with a brisket that's a little bit dry, or you end up with like part of it that's a little bit dry, save it. Make this, because this is going in a liquid. You're going to rehydrate all that. Or you can make it out of my next thing that we're going to do with the leftover brisket, which is coming in another episode. Put a little more oil in here for the next round. Now you can adjust this recipe for the amount of people that you have, or how much brisket you have left over, or how much you want to make. So I don't know if you can see this in the bag or not, but there are a whole bunch of little scraggly pieces of the brisket left in here. And when I get done with the bigger pieces, I'm just going to toss those in and get those kind of cooking a little bit, crisping up a little bit, add that nice texture. And you see that I've kind of got a roux going in the bottom of this, which is basically flour and fat, which is exactly what you need when you're doing any kind of thickening of a liquid in most cases. Or at least, you know, gravy kind of liquid, and definitely for doing this. You kind of need that. Now I'm going to put a little more oil in here so that I can take those little scraggly pieces and get them cooked down a little bit. And I just shake off as much flour as I can. At this point, I am going to add in the onions. Get the paws washed real quick. Dry them off. I'm just getting these kind of coated, and I want to get the onions kind of softened up, maybe a little translucent here. This may take a few. We can add in a little more oil to help along the process. I can turn down the heat a little bit now. I had it on medium-high. Just turned it back down to medium, let these cook down a little bit. I'm going to get a slotted spoon. And you do want to save this flour, because when we go to, if we need to thicken the stroganoff later, this is the flour you want to use. And then if you need to thin it for any reason, you just add a little more beef broth. And the reason we're cooking these onions down first is because you don't want a whole bunch of hard onion in there. It's fine for them to be a little soft. They don't need to be mushy. But you do want to kind of get them softened up, maybe a little translucent. You can see how good it looks with the little bits of the brisket. And it just smells so good. And I haven't even added the garlic yet. Vampires will not come to our house because we use so much garlic. It's an affront to their senses. think those are probably about soft enough. You see that they're softening up. They're not like totally cooked out and fully sweated or anything. They're getting soft. So at this point, now we like a lot of mushrooms in ours, so when I say 8 to 16 ounces, if you like a little less mushrooms, use a little less mushrooms. I will tell you though, if you're going to use canned mushrooms, I warn you against it. I think you're going to lose flavor and you're going to lose texture by using canned mushrooms. Plus, you're going to have to use a lot more cans in this. So I strongly encourage you to use fresh mushrooms. Now, you want to use white mushrooms, that's fine. Crimini mushrooms and baby bellows work great in this. If there's a couple of really big pieces of mushrooms, you can just use your spoon and cut them, kind of like I'm doing right here. Just give that a turn. And the reason why we're cooking our mushrooms down a little bit first is because we kind of want to soften them up, release some of their flavor. We're not trying to get them mushy because we want them to kind of stay good and have not really al dente, but we don't want mush either. But we want to get them and get some of their moisture out into all of this. Again, I'm going to have to add a little bit more oil just to help it along. So when I said, you know, a quarter of a cup to a full cup of oil, you'll probably use that, especially if you're making as much as we do. Next up, the wine. Now you can use white wine if you prefer white wine, but make sure it's a really good dry white wine. We like to do reds whenever we're doing anything with beef. And this is just one of the small ones that I buy for cooking with. That way I don't have to open a great big huge bottle of red and not drink it all. And we just get that around. And you can already see that that's kind of making a wine gravy without putting anything else in there. And at this point, we're going to add in the garlic. Yeah, I know that to a lot of you that seems like a lot of garlic. If it's a lot of garlic for you, use less. If you really like garlic, use more. And then the seasonings. You notice I'm not adding any salt or pepper at this point. I usually don't because the ingredients have a lot of salt and pepper. The Cavender's has salt in it, has pepper in it. The brisket was cooked with a black ops that's got a lot of salt and pepper in it. You know, when you come to the cream mushroom soup, that's got salt in it, unless you're using like the healthy choice, which, why? We're going to cook that all in, and then I'm going to add, you see that's starting to look kind of stroganoffy there, isn't it? So, we like using better than bouillon, and you just mix the paste with hot water, and it makes this wonderful, absolutely the best bouillon ever. And so I just have to give it a stir, make sure it stays blended. Pour that in. That's about 4 cups. Now I may need more, we'll see. But you see that's now it's kind of looking soupy. So at this point, we're going to have that going. We're going to add the beef back in. And I'm going to start the water for the egg noodles. Now, if you don't want to use egg noodles and you want to use something else, go right ahead. You could do it over rice. Not my favorite, but could be yours. So I'm going to let this simmer in here. And you see it's kind of soupy right now. But we're going to let this simmer over about medium heat for about 20 minutes while we make the egg noodles. Now the egg noodles you're just going to prepare to the package directions. You know, and as that 20 minutes goes, you'll give it a little stir and you'll just check it for its thickness, see if it's the consistency that you want. You kind of want like a thicker kind of gravy. If it's not the consistency you want, either add flour, which we may be doing here, or add a little bit more beef broth. I don't anticipate that we're going to need to add beef broth, but we may need to add some of that flour, which I still have right here. And the director's home, so she'll be able to have a hot meal. And in they go. This will only take a few minutes. And you're probably like, oh, why did you just put the sour cream in right away? Well, you don't want to put the sour cream in until the very end, because if you do, it tends to separate and curdle, and then it's not very pleasant looking. It doesn't change the flavor, it just changes the visual, and you don't want that. Now, this is a little bit, it might be okay. One of the things we're going to do here, though, is I am going to taste it, just because you should always taste your food. Don't feed something to somebody that you wouldn't have tasted already. Okay, so at this point, I do think I am going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to give it a stir. I'm going to go wash my spoon. And salt is always excellent. That's why you taste it before, because you don't want to over salt something, but salt helps enhance whatever's in there. So, and let's try it now that I added a little bit of salt and pepper. Yep, that's better. Then it's enough that I could let the people who are eating it add more salt or pepper to their taste. Give the noodles a little stir so they don't stick together. We are almost ready to eat here, people. You see that this is kind of a nice gravy going on here. This is about the texture that I like it. Wasn't quite sure if it would cook down more or not, so I made some more broth. But I can save that broth to do my next thing with brisket, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't quite figured out, in this household, I kind of tend to be the leftover queen. It's like, oh, what can I do with the leftovers? And I usually come up with some pretty good stuff. And it doesn't look like that I will need any more of this flour, but I'm going to set it aside, because once I add the sour cream, which is anywhere from a half a cup to a cup and a half, depending upon how much you like in yours, I'm going to eyeball it. We're probably going to get about a cup in here. If it's a little too liquidy, then I'll add just a little bit more flour and give it a few minutes to just thicken up. I'm going to switch from this stirring implement to my scoop and serve. And you'll have to watch our episode when we go over all of the different things that we use in our kitchen, because it'll be really interesting. And you'll probably laugh at us, because we might be a little obsessed. And let's check the noodles here. And if you're ever doing, pasta from a package, you don't want to necessarily go by time. You actually want to go and pull a noodle out and taste it. Now I can feel that these are still kind of cooking, so we're going to let them give a couple more minutes, and we're going to still let that simmer. Okay, so I think the pasta is probably done. Let me give it, yeah, that's a good al dente. So I'm going to go drain this and then bring it back, and then we'll finish with the sour cream. Not burning the paws. All right, so we are back to the stroganoff and adding the sour cream. Now these things are cool. They're just so easy to have, these little squeeze things. And I'm probably putting about a cup of sour cream in here, which is about 8 ounces. And as you can see, when I start to stir that, that color lightens up a bit, and it'll start to blend in, and you'll get some of that creaminess that goes with this. Now again, I know people like to substitute Greek yogurt for sour cream. I'm not a fan of doing that in this dish. It just makes it taste a little different. But if that's your thing, you do you. All right. And we'll just give that just a minute or two more to just stir. But you see that that's a good consistency right there. That's what we're looking for. Not soupy, more gravy-ish. And then we are ready to put together an absolutely amazing plate of stroganoff. Now I will let you know that if you want to do other seasonings in this that is to your taste, flavor it the way you want to flavor it. All right, we're going to turn that off. I'm going to get a plate. Scoop up a little bit of noodles. Like I said, if you don't want to use egg noodles and you want to use a different kind of noodle, go right ahead. Egg noodles tend to hold stroganoff the best in my opinion. And then you can see, look at how nice and chunky all that is. Just pour that right over. Get a little bit of extra sauce. Pour that right over. Some of these mushrooms that have lifted to the top. Put that right over. And there is a beautiful plate of stroganoff. So I've already tasted the stroganoff to make sure that it would taste good without the sour cream. Now we're going for the final product taste. Get a little bit of noodle, a little bit of mushroom, get some of that wonderful smoked brisket in there. And I keep losing my noodles. Kind of like losing your marbles, just a little less bad for you. Mm. Mm. So the brisket is so tender, it just kind of falls apart, but you still get that little bit of crispy texture from when we fried it. And then just the whole blend of flavors. It's simple, it's easy, it's a great use of leftovers. If you have leftover rice and want to serve it over rice, it is good that way. Not my preferred, but Mike sure loves it that way. Here at Galley of the Sun, if you like what you saw today, subscribe, hit that like button, leave a comment. We shall see you later next time on Galley of the Sun.